Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey.
Stop me if you've heard this one, kids. This is a Star Wars property, and it focuses on a twin who was separated from his sister. This twin idolizes his father for being a perfect Jedi, but the twin was lied to because dad actually killed the mother, and now a guy dressed in black wearing a mask wants him to join the dark side. Yeah, that's A New Hope, essentially, slash Jedi, I guess, slash Empire. I get it. But it could also be the show we're going to talk about here today, because once again, for whatever weird reason, the need to create parallels in the Star Wars universe continues. And today we're talking about the Acolyte. Before we get cranking, let me preface everything we're going to discuss here today with this. This is not going to be an episode that is going to attack the cast. It's going to attack the fact that they are women of color, or women, period, in charge of this show, on the screen and behind the camera. That's not what we do here. If you've never listened to the 6M, welcome to your breath of fresh air. We don't behave like that here. We are grown men, okay? And we're much, much too older than that and much too civilized to be a couple of freaking cavemen here, okay? And that goes for anybody I've ever had on my show, because I don't record with morons, all right? So if you came here to this episode thinking we were going to lambaste the creators, lambaste the cast, you come to the wrong review. Trust me, I promise you on that. The wrong review. What we are going to discuss is the show itself, the issues with the plot, because there's many, the issues with some of the acting, because there's some, and the issues the show has overall, because there's quite a few. All right? That's what we're going to do here today. We'll also tell you what we liked about it as well. Again, we're not here to bash. It's not what I do. If you want that, go get it from somebody else. So now that warning is out of the way, we're going to discuss the show that has been divisive is not even the word. People have actually rallied against this show from the moment it hit the airwaves to right now, this second, and it just ended. Okay? At least for now. But before we do that, let's do this. The Acolyte, also known as Star Wars The Acolyte, is an American science fiction television series created by Leslie Headland for the streaming service Disney+. It is part of the Star Wars franchise, set at the end of the High Republic era before the events of the Skywalker saga, and follows a Jedi investigation into a series of crimes. An assorted cast of actors and actresses fill out this show. And this show, of course, based on Star Wars, created by George Lucas, of course, only one season so far, 8 episodes in this season. The original release date was June 4th, 2024, and it wrapped up on July 16th, 2024. We're going to get into it here today, but that essentially is your lowdown for the Acolyte. So, Phil, we have just watched the last episode. I got a lot of questions. There's a lot of weird stuff happening here. What is your 10,000-foot view? What's your overall opinion on this series?
I think it's a very good concept for a show. I think they do a lot of very smart things with this show. But I think there's probably too many ideas for 8 episodes. I think the pacing didn't help as well with everything that they tried to do with the show. But I really enjoyed a lot of the new characters that they introduced. I really like the idea of doing a show in the High Republic era. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there were a few hiccups here that stopped us from being all-around perfect show. I still don't really go with some of the more negative takes about the show online. But it's got its flaws, but I still enjoyed it.
By the way, shout out to at Starless Mistake on X for that opening comparison. I just found it quite lovely, so I thought I'd throw it in. Phil, look, right out the gate, one of the issues, maybe, tell me if I'm crazy, right? It seems like one of the issues from the jump here is that there's been so much hate and just toxicity in this universe since Disney bought it that even now when shows get bad reviews, even if those reviews are not entirely wrong, it's going to be received as if, well, there goes the fan base again. They're just rallying around it. Oh, here they go. We can't make anything without, fans going nuts and trying to be too opinionated. Is that what's happening here with this show as well, you think?
I think there are two things happening. I think that uh, some people just want to watch the shows for new Star Wars content, and they're willing to give these things a chance. That's usually a lot of the younger viewers. And there are some older viewers that feel that way too. But there are also viewers, and I'm sure you know these kind of people, both from comic book fandom and wrestling fandom, that have spent their entire lives watching these things. And so they've accumulated all this knowledge about something. And then when something in any way makes them feel like, wait, that's wrong.
Mm.
That's not canon. That's not what I know. So throw the whole thing out. And I feel like that happened from the beginning with the show. The beginning when we saw the trailer and uh, they told the story of there possibly being a Sith 100 years before the prequel trilogy, and people are like, "Well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense because in actual prequel trilogy, we have several scenes where the Jedi tell us that that's impossible because there hasn't been a Sith that has existed in over a millennium." And so people were
Mm.
not willing to watch the story and hear it out because they're already against the total idea of the show. Because it's like, but this doesn't make sense. It's not canon. It's like, well, just let them tell their story first. And so I feel like there's a little bit of confirmation bias going on here, where people were so dead set against the show from the beginning that they wouldn't even give it a chance.
Do you think pushing this show back 1,000 years would have made more sense? At least that way it would have addressed that statement anyhow?
No, I think it was fine. I think all of the issues with people assuming that it contradicted the prequel trilogy got addressed by the end of the show. Um, I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, we're this is a franchise that in the first movie, um, they started establishing Luke and Leia as love interests, only to change it to them being cousins. Sorry, sisters, sister and brother.
Mm.
Uh, by the end of the trilogy, and people are fine with that. Sometimes, people are going in a direction with a story, and it changes. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, Phil, they've done this before. I mean, all the way back to, Ben telling Luke that Yoda trained him. Yoda didn't train him. Like that didn't happen because, Lucas wanted to kind of shoehorn in the prequels. I mean, they've done this many times before, man.
Yeah, I mean, and it happens so many times in any any movie franchise and any franchise that's been around as long as Star Wars. There are going to be things that come out where people, make adjustments to the story. There are things where people are going to add things to enrich the story they're telling. Um, but this idea that you can't do anything that possibly contradicts anything from the Lucas films, or it's just wrong, throw the whole thing out. It's like, but Lucas has contradicted himself more than once.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Oh my God. This didn't just start with Disney's acquisition, man. Yeah. This has been
Yeah,
going on for a while.
it started long before that, and I've seen people uh, that are very beholden to the Legends content from the comics or the graphic novels, and I've seen people that are very beholden to the newer stuff in the comics, and they hold that as like, all right, it has to be this or it's wrong. But that's just too rigid of a way to look at anything.
Mhm.
Um, creators are going to make mistakes, and sometimes when you're telling stories, it's not all going to be exactly like fine adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, as we said from the jump, I've got several issues with this, not least of which is the last episode. There's a lot of weird things that happen in that I'm left scratching my head. I don't quite understand, but they're making choices. Phil, I'll tell you this. I don't know how much of this you're paying attention to on socials, but like hashtag renew the acolyte is being put out by the show's creators. And I'm like, man, this is starting to feel like, I don't know, this is not an attack, all right, but it kind of feels like you're doubling down. Like a lot of people, look, I'm not talking about the wackos, Phil, who hate women and black people. Those guys, you know how we feel about that. But the people who are generally just criticizing the story itself, the plot points that go nowhere, the fact the episodes were too short, stuff that I've already said here today. It's almost like, well, we're going to double down. We have a great show and we know it's great and we love it. You should love it too. And everybody's just going to love it. So we're going to try to get this renewed for a second season. And I'm thinking, do what you want, but I don't know. Does it feel to you like maybe there's not a lot of listening going on, or do you think they're just chalking it up to, it doesn't matter. We're just going to try to move forward anyway.
Well, here's the thing with current internet culture.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let the creator tell the story that they want to tell.
Mm.
There's a certain bit to this where they should understand criticism and fix things like pacing issues.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very much different than fandom saying, "Hey, I can tell this story better than you because I've made up my mind of how this story should be told, and so I just don't want your version of it."
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to listen to those people. They just don't. And I hate that the internet has convinced those kind of people that they're always right and that creators have had to listen to them. We've had so many instances like the Sonic the Hedgehog thing where they changed the design
Mm.
and the design looks better, but it is also a slippery slope because it has taught some fans that if you complain long enough that these studios should listen to you and change things specifically to the way you want them. Uh, and that isn't always right.
Yeah, I mean, it can be used for good or bad, I guess, like the Force too. There's
Yeah.
ways it can be used to make a positive impact. Like when that Sonic stuff came out, man, everyone's like, "This doesn't it look like him?" Like, did you guys not know what it looks like? Why does it look like this? Like, and the change was for the better, like to your point, but it does seem like more often than not that people raising the most cane are just hating on something than just for the sake of hating it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have an issue with things like the hashtag to renew because if they feel like, hey, we have more story to tell here, we set up a great premise to continue this story and do more with it. I totally understand because by the end of the 8 episodes, I do feel like there is room for more episodes. There is room for another season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see where it goes. I just, part of me is wondering, let's say, and let's say that the second season is ripped to shreds. And again, I'm not talking about the wackadoodle way over the top stuff, but by critics and fans who are being honest when they say the pacing's off. I don't feel anything for this character. They're contradicting what they just said 5 minutes ago. Like things like that. Like if there's a second season and it happens, not the end of the world, but it does make me personally wonder, are we listening? Again, if they're not, Phil, I would understand because maybe to the creators it sounds like just a big wall of negativity and just to dig through it would be way too much. So instead of trying to dig through it, we're just going to be not oblivious, but we're kind of going to deflect from it and try to push forward this season too. I'm not saying I agree with that way of doing it, but I can kind of if that's what's going on, I can kind of understand it at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think that there are plenty of well-intended criticisms of just the way that the story is executed.
Mm.
But a lot of that is being drowned out by people that just were going to hate this thing no matter what for whatever reason because they don't feel like it should exist because it's a non-canon story in their mind or because it's people of color that are in it
Mhm.
because it's another woman that's the lead character again, whatever reason. And it's kind of hard to sift through all of that to get to the actual valid criticism sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, when you see a movie that's not great, it makes you wonder, did no one on the movie believe that this did no one see the problems? Like, you and I have reviewed plenty of movies here, and we're often curious, did no one know? Like, how did no one know that this one plot point didn't get answered, or that this one thing was left on the cutting room floor and it shouldn't have been? Like, I don't know. To me, trying to look at it objectively, I'm genuinely curious. Is there no one in that production who has, maybe whispered it or had a quiet text conversation and said, maybe we should have addressed this. If we get a season two, we should definitely fix this. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. Who knows? But that,
Yeah, I don't think that this was a perfect
no.
show by any stretch of the imagination. I think some of the writing here was a bit wonky.
Mhm.
Um, but like I said, overall, I enjoyed it. I do think that we do need to get away from centering everything around the same time period,
Mhm.
and so if we get more stuff from the High Republic era from this, I think that that's a great thing. I think it's really cool that we got to see a time period where the Jedi were on top and they were at the height of their power, but also at the height of their arrogance.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And that begs a question. I've seen this question kind of thrown around. Uh, it's weird to ask this because none of this is real, but has this damaged the Jedi in any way? Like the whole, and we'll get into the story here, but like to your point, it almost displays these guys as being just, holier than thou. Like they've got it figured out. They don't need your help. They're going to do what they want to do, and you can't stop them. I mean, has this damaged it to any degree? You think?
No, because I think uh, Lucas has established from the very first trilogy that the Jedi are flawed, and the Jedi's flaws are often their very undoing.
Yeah. I mean, there's lines in here. There's that one line, something about, this, you're going to regret this far into the future if Jedi, I can't quote it, but it's the line. There's a line in there. And it's like,
Which is it from the senator guy from the last episode, or
no, what a great little part. But
yeah, that was great.
no, I think it was from the twins' mother when she said something to the effect of, one day this will be your undoing. Like, and I'm thinking,
Yes.
wow, that's on the nose. Like, all right. You know what I mean? The benefit of foresight, I suppose. Yeah,
Y-
that cameo in the last episode was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that.
yes. Yeah, I thought that line was great because there's a lot of foreshadowing throughout this show
Mhm.
to Anakin, and I think that in a lot of ways that's what the show is supposed to do. It's supposed to plant a lot of seeds for Palpatine and Anakin later.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
if you're not a fan of the prequel trilogy, I can see a lot of this stuff like not piquing your interest at all.
well, you and I both know how I feel about that. But yeah, 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 it's again, I'm not here to bash. I'm not trying to. There's several things. The parallels they try to draw. Phil, it's a weird thing they do. They did it with the second set of movies with there's comparisons between, of course, Kylo and Vader and Rey and Luke. And dude, here again, once again, they're trying to draw parallels. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the way that they did it though was interesting because it wasn't just drawing the parallels to Luke Skywalker and some of the stuff. There were parallels to the prequel trilogy, and then there were immediate parallels to the sequel trilogy as well. Because I guess we're supposed to believe that Osha and May are the first dyad, like, and that's the concept that we get in the sequel trilogy. There's also things that they play off of that kind of pay off later on in the sequel trilogy as well. Um, I really like how they flipped a lot of tropes on their head throughout this show, um, where there's enough to get you to not trust the Jedi because there's a lot of things that they do that we've seen bad guys do. I mean, uh, like the episode where May is in the ship with Soul and Osha is on the planet with Chimere. They flip a lot of things on their head. Like Chimera is actually talking to her like a teacher. He's
Mhm.
being warm. He's offering her food. These are all things that we've seen a Jedi do. We've seen good guys do. Um, but then on the other hand, Soul is in a ship and he's not outright like interrogating her, but he does have her tied down to a plank, like we've seen a villain do.
Mm.
Even some of the stuff that we've seen the council do, like having like these meetings behind closed doors, going and keeping secrets. Um, all of this stuff is stuff we've seen the Sith do. And so I think it's a great way to show you throughout this show that all of this stuff is a matter of perspective, which is also a tie back to the line
Yeah.
from Rise of Skywalker that Anakin gives of, from my perspective, the Jedi are the bad guys.
And it's also Bid tells Luke from a certain point of view.
Yes. And
Jeez.
so I think they played that off very well throughout this show
Mm.
of changing things around where if you look at it a certain way, it's like, well, wait a minute. If you didn't do anything wrong, why do you have her tied up?
And we're going to bounce around here, and by the way, spoilers, kids, if you can't figure that out, spoilers. When Saul gets killed in the last episode, I'm sitting there like, let me get this straight. She is going to choke the life out of him. I mean, Phil getting run through by a saber is a much more, it's a, I don't know about painless death, but at least it's more humane than choking the life out of him. Like that seemed a bit severe to me. And I thought, well, I don't care about this character at all now. I know what Saul did was wrong. I get it. But when we get the flashbacks and you see that their mother was, I feel she was kind of giving him no choice. I mean, of course, they shouldn't have been there. I get it. But he was trying not to touch her. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. I can't possibly root for this character now. I just can't.
I mean, to play devil's advocate
Mhm.
here, I agree that Soul in some ways was doing what he felt like was right. And Soul is a very flawed character. He's a very conflicted character as well. But at the same time, you kill my mother. Like there's no like in the entirety of fiction, that scene is one of the most evil things you can do to anybody is killing their parent. I mean, it's the thing that makes Batman Batman.
Mm.
We've seen in the Civil War as well when Tony found out that Bucky killed his parents. Like that was the thing. Like there was no reasoning with him afterwards. Like, no, I don't want to talk to you. You killed my mother. And not just that Soul killed her mother, he lied to her for the entire time that she knew him.
Yeah, that's fair.
He lied about it and he continued to lie about it. He could have always told her the truth, but he didn't want to because he didn't want her to look at him differently.
Do we see him as a Force Ghost if there's a season 2?
I don't know. I don't know what where we're going with this. I personally thought that Soul was a great character. I
Yeah.
thought that there are a lot of parallels between him and Qui-Gon, of him going against the Order, trying to train somebody that's too old for the Order, and all of these things that he's done just like based off of emotion and based off of a hunch. He's not as pragmatic in some ways as Qui-Gon is.
Mhm.
But I thought he was a great character. And some of those action scenes with him were great. I thought the fight with him and Chimera in episode 8 was really good.
Yeah, I thought he was great. Lee Young Jae or Lee Young Jai, perhaps. Let's see, as Saul is one we're talking about. Respected Jedi Master and does a fantastic game. He was in, does a fantastic job. I'm reading ahead of myself. He was in Squid Game. Did you ever watch Squid
Yes.
Game, Phil?
I haven't.
Me neither.
But from my understanding, didn't he learn English specific for this role?
Oh, did he? Interesting.
I think he did. I think that he learned English for this role.
Wow. He does a great job.
Yeah, I think he's great. I think all the emotional bits with him are great. The scene you're talking about where he's getting force choked and he has that single tear rolling down, so good.
Yeah, geez. Again, that's a gruesome death.
There's so many things to go into. If he have just let things play out the way they were supposed to, and he didn't try to interfere, um, he would have gotten the Padawan that he wanted, and she would have been a Jedi.
Yeah, again, it's I think he looks the part, by the way. I think he looks great. I didn't care for like they all had a dress code. They all had like a team yellow robe thing going on. I felt, it's fine, but I think, well, Tom, this is before things got dark and cloudy and they were all killed and whatnot. So it's okay that they're a little colorful. What'd you think about the color scheme they had going on, man?
I liked it because that was a big part of the High Republic era,
Hmm.
that the Jedi wore white and gold, and they had the garments. Even why am I drawing a blank on the main Jedi Master that speaks towards the end of the episode that is friends with Soul? Yeah, even like her robe that she changed into later in the series, I thought all of that was cool because we didn't get a chance to see all of that. We didn't get a chance to see the Jedi at the height of their power, at the peak of their decadence. Like even like when they're showing the temple in Coruscant and it has like the gold on it. Later when we see it in the prequel trilogy, it doesn't have that.
Vernestra.
Vernestra. There you go.
Yeah, great name. Yeah, I was really happy with him here. I thought he did a fantastic job. Again, this is through no fault of his own. Some of the dialogue is a bit wonky, and some of his motivations. Would a true Jedi Master have? I don't know. And then Carrie Ann Moss, who we saw for 5 minutes in the first episode, she's in Dara. Brother, talk about decisions made by these creators, man. One of the top names in this show, probably the top name in this show, and you kill her in the first episode. Like, I did not see that coming. I mean, what do you think about that decision? You think that was the right move?
It was a very Star Wars decision to set up somebody that was very important to the narrative and kill them right away,
Mm.
and then fill in all of the background on them as you go. Because that was the whole thing with Obi-Wan. You kill him straight away, and then we learn more and more about Obi-Wan later on.
Mm.
But I thought Carrie Ann was great in the first episode. She talked about how quickly she had to learn the choreography for her fight in her episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was on Fallon or one of those late night shows, but she was talking about how quickly she had to learn it and how she didn't think she was going to get in time, but she did. And I thought the fight scene with May was fantastic. I thought she was really good in the flashback episode as well. I thought she ended up being one of the best characters in that episode. Because she seemed like the only person that was sensible in that episode. Like, wait a minute, guys, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, her death is more tragic in some ways because she was telling them all along, like, hey, we shouldn't interfere in this. We should let this play out the way it's supposed to play out. We need to go back and speak to council first. She was trying to be the voice of reason in the room, and it all ended up going awry.
What do you think about this? They're calling it force fu, this kung fu stuff.
I don't know why people are so bothered by some of that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Again, new concepts seem to rub fans the wrong way. What I have to assume at this era, where the Jedi at the height of their power, that they would use the Force in this way to kind of move around and be light on their feet in this way.
Mm-hmm.
The further you get away from them really studying the Force and them being at their most powerful, yeah, they may not use the Force the same way. But again, why are we so upset that 1,000 years ago they used the Force differently, and 1,000 years later people that aren't as in tune with the Force didn't do the same thing? Yeah, because they didn't have the same teachings. I don't know why that's hard for people to understand.
Yeah, because your boy killed them all, like freaking Anakin, man.
Exactly. There are the Jedi are extinct. There are only 2 Jedi left. By the time we get to the original trilogy, or at least we only see the 2 Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's a good point. Ooh, that begs the question of what other Jedi exist at the time of A New Hope.
Boink Studios is the home of Tom Clark's Main Event, Tom Clark's 6M podcast, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Visit the site today for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Check out the site and bookmark today, boinkstudios.com.
You know what would be interesting to me? And look, Phil, we've got this thing about we've went to the future, we went to the past, now we went to the distant past, went to the past again. We keep time hopping and stuff. What about a movie that takes place at the same time as episodes 4, 5, and 6, but it's in a different corner? Do you know what I mean? That to me would be interesting to see.
Yeah, because now we know that Ahsoka is still alive during the original trilogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I assume we could go back to that time period.
Yep. Yeah, it would kind of be like it kind of be like the Marvel Netflix shows for the Defenders universe. Like it's still in the MCU, but you don't get any of those guys in it. You know stuff's happening and they talk about the blip and everything, but that's it. You don't get to see any of those guys.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they've sort of done that with Rebels, but I mean, Rebels is really it's around the same period, but it's really like concurrent with Rogue One and some of the building up to uh episode 4.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's talk about the star of this show. And this is, she's only 25, by the way, Amandla Stenberg. And she plays who we perceive to be twins. However, they're not twins. So, spoiler alert, not twins. They're actually the same person. And essentially, that their mothers and this witch's coven, who like are force sensitive and whatnot, are basically using the force. They created both these girls, and we still do not have an explanation as to why. Midichlorians are back, kids. For everybody who missed them, never you fear, it's back. We didn't want it, but they've returned. So now we're trying to explain force sensitivity to science. That's wonderful. That's fun. But look, Phil, here's what I'll say. I think she did, for what she was tasked to do, I thought she did a fine job. I question, again, the doubling down. There's the music video basically defending the show. Like, I get it, dude. If my work was being attacked 6 ways from Sunday, maybe I would feel the need to defend it. Maybe I'd feel the need to do an interview, or I don't know. I'm not trying to make light of it, but like, I don't know. I can't possibly put myself in her shoes or the showrunner's shoes at all. I get it. It just feels to me like I don't know why this is. I don't know why we're doing this. Like, I don't know. I'm sort of detached, Phil, because I don't really have a dog in the hunt here. I'm trying to be objective about it. But what did you think about her overall in this series?
I think Amanda's incredibly talented.
Yeah.
Great actress. Every time we've seen her play violin, I know they did this great short where they showed her in the studio recording the original John Williams theme on
Hmm.
violin. It was incredibly beautiful. I believe she played it again on Jimmy Fallon's show. Very, very talented young woman. Um, I thought she did a great job with the material she was given. Now, the writing
Mm.
wasn't always great, but I thought she did a great job of playing two different characters on this show, and giving them their own distinct characteristics, and um, also playing two different story arcs.
And shout out to the effects crew, Phil, because you really can't tell that they're not two separate people in the same scene together.
Yes. So I thought she was great. Ironically, this isn't her first time being cast in something where people are upset that they cast a black woman. Their claim to fame initially was being in Hunger Games as Rue, and people were upset that Rue was black. Um,
Oh, good Lord.
and so here we are again. She's in another franchise where people are like, "Ah, here we go again. It's a woman. It's black. You got to check all of these boxes to get other people to watch." And maybe just maybe she just was somebody that was very excited about being a part of this franchise, and she got the role. And from everything I've seen, she seems like she's a big fan of Star Wars.
Hmm.
She cosplayed as Padme for one of the, I think it was a red carpet event or something. She seemed like she just likes the franchise and she wanted to be a part of it. Um, Go figure. Where have we heard this before? This was also the John Boyega story, where John Boyega was very excited about being a part of this franchise until fans ruined his experience, and then the making of the movie left him jaded, and now we'll probably never see him do anything Star Wars related again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think often about uh, the juxtaposition of him on the red carpet in London, being very excited about being in Star Wars, and like just how like different he was at that time period. He was out there with his family, overjoyed, and then years later doing an interview where he just like, yeah, I might not. I don't ever want to do anything Star Wars related again.
Wow. We've done those movies, kids. They're in the archives, by the way. We've done those movies, Phil, and we said then it's a bold choice to suddenly and without warning announce that stormtroopers are not all clones of Jango Fett. It's fine. You didn't tell us, but it's fine. And now you've made it clear that it's sort of they're being drafted or that you're volunteering. It's like the Nazi army or something. And he kind of didn't have a choice. And he doesn't look like, fine, I'm totally okay with it. But if you're going to make a bold choice, you need to have a storyline. And Phil, they dropped the ball with this guy from the jump, it feels like.
Yeah, they did a red herring with him. That was fine, but I think other
Yeah.
things like putting him front and center on a lot of the promotion for it and getting people to think he was going to be the main character and he wasn't. And then you had things like you couldn't put him front and center on certain promotional material in China because you thought that they wouldn't go see the movie if it was a movie about a black man. It's just a lot of things that in retrospect looked very icky, and I'm sure his experience with it behind the scenes didn't help matters at all either. Everything I've read about it doesn't sound good. Um, but yeah, I think they dropped the ball in some ways with Finn. I thought Finn was a great new character that they could have done more with. But
Mhm.
uh, on the flip side here, I thought they did a lot of really good things with May and Osha's character arc. And they did a lot to get me interested in these two new characters, and I'd like to see more of it going forward.
It's funny that, I'm not trying to get too hung up on this. And none of this is real. It's fine. But it almost felt like the way they switched Osha and May, they sort of switched them in terms of like their ideologies and stuff. At the end, maybe May should have stopped Osha from killing him. Maybe she should have said, "You don't have to do this. You know, we're better than this or whatever." And then, like she said earlier, let him stand trial for his crimes. Let him have to answer to the Jedi. I almost felt like, because again, Phil, they took both these characters and sort of flip flopped them during the course of the show, which I thought was another interesting choice. But I don't know. It kind of felt like that should have been the way they wrapped it up. What do you think about this whole concept of they're not twins, they're the same person? Did they even grasp that by the end? Because I'm trying to recall if they both actually knew the truth. One of them did. Well, I guess he said it in front of both of them, right? But
Hmm.
I don't know, dude. It kind of feels like there's no wait a minute, what moment where they're kind of questioning. I don't know. It's weird.
It was a bit confusing, but I do think that when you recognize that they're not twins, that they're the same person just created twice, it adds to the story and what they're trying to tell. Just this concept of perspectives and how, from the very beginning, when you look at certain things May did, it's like, oh well, May's the bad guy,
Hmm.
and then you give Osha the same environment, you give her the same circumstances, and she sees things a totally different way. And I
Hmm.
think that's what they're trying to say, almost like this. When you play God in a way, and you create two people, they're not gonna do and act the same way. And so you have a person that is the same person, they're just duplicates, but both of those individuals, they see things a different way, they behave a different way, and so their paths are different. I think that was an interesting choice. Do I think that they explored that well or explained it well? Maybe not, but I
Hmm.
do think it's an interesting concept. Um, and I think from the episode where we get the flashback where they're sitting under the tree and they already foreshadow things like the force choke, And uh, from our perspective, it looks like Osha's just curious. She's holding that little butterfly thing in her hand. It looks like she's just curious. It looks like May's the
Mm.
one that's wrong because she interjects in and she's like using the force to hold it and dominate it.
Yeah, and like talking about the story and the stuff. I mean, dude, the characters, those two little girls, like, well, I want to learn. Well, you can't. Yeah, but I want to. I'm like, why would you want to? What? Even that motivation to me didn't make any sense. Like, you understand that if you leave, you are leaving everything you have ever known. And I guess to me, there wasn't enough there for me to believe this little girl would be willing to leave behind everything she's ever known. Not on the actresses, of course, it's on the writing. I mean, I think from the jump, Phil, for me personally, you're asking me to believe too much. And I'm going along with it because I watched every episode, but I don't know. I didn't feel, I wasn't compelled enough to believe this little girl's gonna, yeah, she wants to go. And I'm like, no, she doesn't. Come on. Like, no kid. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Did you bump into that at all, like in the very beginning of this when it started going?
I didn't because you set up these two um, different characters that are the same person.
Mm,
But from one person's point of view, um, they kind of believe in order. They kind of believe in status quo in the way things are. But the other one is very much um, her focus is like curiosity and emotion. And so from the very beginning, if you dig deep into Osha's character, it's like, oh yeah, of course, you would be the one that falls to the dark side because you're not going to just follow everything somebody tells you to do. You've seen that from the very beginning with the tribe she was in. She didn't want to just do everything that they're telling her. She questioned everything. And that was May's initial conflict with her. It's like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just do what you're told? Why don't you just, this is what we're supposed to do. And
mm,
from the beginning, Osha's just like, well, why? Why do we have to do that? Why can't I just do this? And I'm curious about that over there. And so yeah, when somebody else shows up and shows her a different way of life, and it's like, oh, well, he's a Jedi and all these other things, and that's not what I'm taught to believe. I want to do something else. I want to do that. It fit with her character, and not to say that I think that she was intentionally contrarian. I just think that um, she was naturally curious, and inquisitive about all of these other things, and because of that, uh, that led her against authority, and so that she was never gonna work with the Jedi.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to a certain extent. I was just trying to, I guess kind of put myself in their spot and say, I don't know if I'm buying this, and if I believe their motivations. We have to give a shout out to the actresses. They're actually twins, Lauren and Leah Brady, who played young Osha and May respectively.
Yeah,
There you go.
they're two different actresses that play Ocean May early on, so they don't look like identical twins if you pay close attention.
Mhm.
Which I saw some people online bumping into, and I'm just like, it's a TV show. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I thought in those scenes with young Osha and young May, we did get a lot of the building blocks for the characters. And I mean, even the way they start the show, we start with the fight and May killing a Jedi, and then we get Osha waking up, and it's from a completely different point of view, and it's just like straight away we're like, okay, wait a minute, that person looks like
Mhm.
you. That's not you. What do you mean it's not you? And she's very like defiant from the beginning. Nope, that's not me. I didn't do this. I'm innocent. And um it's just so interesting how from start to finish how they've changed things, and it's just this idea of balance of from the beginning of the show, uh, Osha is the one that is completely in the dark about everything, and she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know that May is alive. That she doesn't know any of the stuff that the Jedi are keeping from her. But on the other side, May is driven by this idea of revenge or justice or this thing that she needs. And by the end of the show, it's completely flipped.
Yeah, I like that twist, by the way. That was pretty cool. Her waking up not knowing what's going on. I was here for that because I'm like, wait a minute, did she have like split personality? What's going on? Yeah, that was cool. I actually thought it was a shapeshifter to begin with. I thought, ooh, that'd be different for Star Wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool. Also in this cast, we have Daphne Keene. And if any of you have went back and heard the Logan episode here in the archives, you know Daphne is Laura in Logan. Fantastic job. She is Jackie Lawn, Saul's current young Padawan, who doesn't make it out of this alive, Phil. But you know, I saw some pushback on that. Like, why did she have to die so early? Like, I thought she did a bang up job here as well.
Yeah, I thought she was great as well. I thought she was fantastic in the fight scenes with Chimere. Um, she's just matured into a great actress. She's done other action stuff from Logan, and she was excellent here as well. Her story is tragic, but this is also kind of a Rogue One thing where you're introduced to all of these Jedi that see Chimere, and the second they see Chimere, you know they're gonna die because, as we know in the prequel trilogy, they don't know the Sith exists. So anybody that actually saw the Sith can't possibly live through this.
Oh, good point. Because it would then it would be spread. People would know about it. Ooh, excellent point.
Yeah, so I mean, from the very beginning, when they're on that planet and they see Chimera, I was like, okay, well, all of these Jedi are going to die. They can't possibly live through this. And so I was hoping I was wrong all the way through the entire fight with her and Chimera. And I was just like, just get out of there, Jackie. You can't beat him. Just get out of there. And so when she's fighting him, even like when she does the dual blade fight with him, which is freaking awesome, and
Mhm.
she lasts throughout that fight, I was like, okay, get off the planet. Get Soul and get off the planet. And so when she fights him again, I was like, oh, she's gonna die. And the way she died was very, very sad.
Mm,
But
yeah.
it's also that there's this tragedy of she's everything that Osha was supposed to be. She joins the Jedi. She and Soul actually taught her she didn't have any of the trauma and baggage that Osha brought in. And she came in with all this promise, and she still ended up being led astray because of mistakes that Soul made before her.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you know, I would like to have seen a little bit more of her, um, because you're right, the way she went was bad. And you've been talking about the heavy here. This is Manny Jacinto as Khmer, yeah,
I think that's how you pronounce
and
it. Chimere?
Chimere. That's right. Yeah, my bad. I got issues with this, not with the actor. I thought he's he's great. I don't get this. I don't know what he's supposed to be. We find out at the very end whose Padawan he was and who
Do we?
trained him. Yeah.
Technically, we don't.
Well, when she comes off that ship, she senses him until he puts that helmet on.
Oh,
So
you're
I
right. You're right.
assumed,
You're right. I thought you
yeah.
meant on the Sith side.
So I just assumed that meant that he was her former. It's fine. Again, I'll sleep tonight, but I didn't get it. I kept waiting for there to be some, and you know, he's kind of like it's a very devilish approach to not be full blown heel, right? Because full blown heel, it's easy to hate that guy. And it's easy to try to kill him, but that's
Mhm.
not what he's doing. He's a sweet talker, and he turns his back on her multiple times. She's had chances to kill him, she doesn't take it, and it's like we have to see him with his shirt off because of reasons. He's got to be all hunky, naked in the water. That's fine. I don't care.
Parallels, buddy. All bunch of parallels to Kylo Ren. They even played Kylo Ren's
Yes.
music several times.
Got to take that dude's shirt off. All right, put your clothes back on. That's what I say to the guy. Yeah, put your clothes back on. But I just didn't get this, Phil. Again, I thought he was fine. I don't understand what the point of this is. Like, and then we're led to believe that he and Usher are cool. He's trying to hold her hand in the end, and she's letting him do it. And I thought, what am I seeing? I don't know. It felt off to me. Something about it didn't. I don't know. Again, this is the writing at play, Phil. This is not the acting at all. This is the writing. Some of the dialogue. little wonky. I thought this character maybe could have stole the show. He didn't for me. What did you think about this?
I really liked Chimere. I
Hmm.
mean, I love that he is the exact opposite of Soul in every way. Even his name, Chimere. It is I believe it is either Latin, it's another language for moon. And Soul's name, of course, means sun.
Yep.
They're the exact opposites. And so when you look at the way that Soul came to the planet and he's just like, well, no, we don't allow other force shooters to teach younglings. And so you have to come with us. Look, take the test. You're supposed to come with us. This is the right thing to do. In every way, he's telling her, this is what you have to do. And I'm right. I am right about all of this. And Chimere is just like, no, you got a choice. Here, I can show
Mm.
you this and I can show you something you're curious about, but you don't have to come with me. Come with me if you want to. And I think that like them putting those two different perspectives in front of you is like, yeah, hey, following this guy that gives you everything you want and doesn't make you follow rules, it's easy. And that's why in some ways it's looking like, hey man, he's the better choice, isn't he?
Mm.
Because look, he's not making you do anything you don't want to do. Um, he's telling you the truth. That guy's lying to you. And so
Yeah.
I think putting those two things against each other is part of the story of like showing you when she was a kid, how Soul came to her village and almost made it look like, oh, well, this is what the Jedi do. We come and we go from world to world and we test children and yes, it's their choice to follow us, but heavily implied that hey, if you don't follow us, you cannot learn how to use the Force because it's
Mm.
illegal. And from the second we see Chimere, he just says, I just want freedom. I
Yeah.
know you're painting me as a Sith or a bad guy, but I just want the freedom to do what I want.
They're acting like cops, man.
Yeah, so I think the Chimere character is great. I think when we first see him, um, I really like the idea that they played off of the stuff from the original trilogy. Like when we first see Yoda, he just seems like just a bumbling alien, and when we see this guy, he's playing himself like, oh, he's a bumbling follower. He's just somebody that's helping May finish her mission. But then we
Mm.
find out like he's actually the master. So I think just like that parallel between him and Yoda is great. But then also the first time we actually see him in the cloak and the helmet, and he drops down from that tree, and it's all very creepy. The way he pushes Osha out the way with the Force and has that whole fight, which man, that fight with the Jedi is so good. The way he just picks them apart one by one. The way he's killing them is just so awesome. Uh, he force pulls the one guy into his blade after he stabbed the other one. So good. Just very savagely breaks the other guy's neck in front of everybody.
I mean, I will say this is some of the best Jedi fight scenes I think we've ever seen in this show.
Yeah. I thought, I mean, even Chimere's his mask and the brace he wore that he was using to deflect the lightsabers and shut them down. That was cool because we didn't get to see it. We saw this guy headbutt a lightsaber to cut it off. It's so cool.
What
um,
did you think about him having a smaller saber in the hilt of his other one?
that was such a great reveal as well when he showed that during the fight with Jackie. That's the first time we saw it, and that's how he killed her. But it's also a very feudal Japan samurai thing to do because some
Mm.
samurai would keep a smaller blade in the hilt of their bigger blade. And so I thought that was great. I thought that throughout this show, they did a lot of ties back to samurai movies, and that's where we got the initial inspiration for the Jedi. That's where we got the initial inspiration for Vader's helmet and stuff. So I was really happy we saw a lot more of that here. We saw a lot more inspiration to like kung fu movies and wire work, and I thought it all fit
Mm.
because that's initially the inspiration for the franchise to begin with. And just
That's
Chimere in
fair.
general, just the fact that a lot of the way he moved and everything. We didn't see a Sith move like this. I think it was revealed that the entire fight, well, it was revealed because uh, when Osha puts his helmet on, we see that he can't see out of this thing. So he's fighting
Mm-hmm.
these entire fights blind.
Crazy.
You can kind of see it in a fight with Soul, where his movements is just like he's kind of moving around just based off of feeling.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was very much like a mind or like a muscle memory sort of thing where he just has intuition, I guess, through the Force. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that adds to some of the fight choreography. When you rewatch the initial fight with the Jedi, you can see through some of his movements. Like, yeah, he's moving like he's not actually seeing. And of course, this is all again tied back to the way that Luke was initially trained, where um, Obi-Wan tells him, like, don't use your eyes. Your eyes will deceive you.
With the blast shield down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to fight? Young whiny Luke is my favorite Luke. So it's a very Magneto thing to do, Phil, to say that a Jedi can't sense your presence if you have that helmet on.
Yes, and that was a thing I saw online. People seem to not like. Okay, well, how did he show up there and none of them sensed him? Well, he explained it because he was using the helmet, and that's how we see that again in episode 8 when Vernestra senses him, and he immediately puts the helmet on because he forgot that that's
Mm,
how he was staying hidden all this time.
yeah.
But yeah, I thought a lot of the stuff with him, his tech he used. I thought like just the way he fought, just his entire way of his philosophies and everything. It was very interesting, and I mean, again, that's why I'm saying the parallels between what we've already seen a good Jedi do later in the franchise. He does that a lot for Osha, so it's like, well, of course, now you see why Osha picked him because we've seen Jedi do this with their Padawan. Like, I mean, even the blast shield thing, him saying, "Yeah, yeah, just wear my helmet. It's fine. You should try it on." Or, "Hey, hold the saber this way. You're not holding your arm up high enough."
So, what are we to understand happened when she put the helmet on and it looked like he was there in the room, but he wasn't, and his eyes had rolled back into black? What were we witnessing there? Because I can't quite wrap my head around that.
So we saw in a flashback episode that her mother was using the dark side to influence other people. That's what she did to the younger Padawan, and that's how he lost control.
Mm,
That's also
mhm.
what she did. Well, what the others did to the Wookiee that was with them, and that's how he lost control. Um, and it seemed like because she was like totally in immersed in her emotions and feelings under the helmet that she unintentionally used that power that her mother used. But
Oh, I see.
Chimera Chimera was able to shake himself out of that place because um, if you notice when his eyes turn black, it also cuts to that scene where he's kind of in that other place
Mhm, mhm.
the same way, which those scenes are so cool in the flashback episode um, when her mother is controlling Torben, and it cuts to inside Torben's mind, and she's talking to him and like whispering all of these things in his ear, and the same thing is happening to Chimera, but because he's trained and he's already used to the dark side, he was able to shrug it off and control it.
That's what was happening. See, I really had no idea, but that makes sense now. That makes sense. By the way, the mother of the twins, Jodie Turner Smith, plays Mother Anastasia, the leader of the coven. The other mother is Margarita Laviva. And we mentioned Torben, that is Dean Charles Chapman. Can we admit that the makeup job with the phony hair and whatnot was pretty effing terrible? When he's floating in midair, I thought, come on. I mean, just imagine the budget's a little bit better. I do like the idea, Phil, that if you are not necessarily a youngling, right? But like if you're a young Padawan, you are susceptible to everything. It's like a bunch of Batman and Robins everywhere you look. And Robin's kind of an idiot. Like, not his fault because he's not skilled yet. He doesn't have. I did like the fact that they really tried to keep this thing at least feeling like Star Wars to that respect, I have to say.
Yeah, I really like that. You have that scene in episode 8 where it's like you guys are trying to control something that you can't, and
Mm.
um, Renestra immediately comes back with, "We don't try to control the Force," and he says, "No, your emotions." And the four Jedi that are on Brendok, that was their undoing, was their emotions. I mean, Torben straight away, Torben was saying the whole time, "I just want to go home. Why are we still here?" It's just like, "I'm bored here. I don't want to be here." It's a very young, impetuous thing. And him rushing into that village and saying, "We got to do something," that's what caused everything. If he wouldn't have done that, none of that would have happened.
Hmm.
And so I like that. I like that we see older Torben, and he has all this guilt over these things that happened on that day, and you should see that uh those witches being in his mind still affected him. I like that as well. And I can't remember what is the Wookiee's character's name. We saw that with him as well, what the witches being in his mind still affected him.
Kelnaka.
Kaunaka, yes. And they do a lot of deep cuts to things that if you're into Star Wars lore, it makes sense. Um, which is why I think it's so funny and so ironic that some people are like, "Oh, this show is disrespectful." It doesn't care about Star Wars lore at all. There's so many things from Star Wars lore that they do here, that if you know anything about it, it's like, "Oh, that's such a good Easter egg." I mean, like Cal Naka's vow, he goes off on a vow because he used his claws to hurt Torben. And that's a big no-no with Wookiees. Anybody that's done that, you're supposed to take a vow and go off into exile from your
Mm.
village.
I do think that they were trying to do new things. And look, this may be maybe this is splitting hairs, Phil. If you're saying to me, okay, here's a show after The Force Awakens or after Rise of Skywalker, right? Let's say that here's a show after that. Guess what, Phil? Do new stuff. Who cares? We don't know yet, right? But I do kind of feel like if you're telling me that we're going to do new stuff, but you've never heard anything about it and it's already happened, like, okay, but be prepared. There may be some backlash.
Of
Like,
course.
I don't think they were disrespecting. I do question some of the choices of doing new stuff.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think that it's so hard to do new things with established franchises because people are so set in what they want and they're so set in their knowledge of the franchise already. So it's like, well, I don't really want new things. I want you to do things the way I want you to. And
Mhm.
not everybody feels that way, but it's hard. It's hard for a franchise that's been around for as long as Star Wars is to do new things, especially new things in established continuity.
You're right. Yeah. Playing the pop song, playing that song over the end of episode seven's credits. I'm like, oh, that'll get them going now. Like, at least it wasn't in the show.
Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you.
It's not about the music selection, Phil. It's just about the fact that, man, you are really, again, it sounds like I'm attacking. I don't mean to. I hope I'm not sound like it. You're really doubling down. Like, not only do we not care what you think, we're going to double down. I'm like, look, I'm not attacking your show. So you're not hurting my feelings at all. If that's what you want to do, fine. I don't know if you're making any new fans with choices like that. But Phil, I'm also not suggesting they buckle and change everything so people will shut up because I don't think that's the right move either.
No, I don't either. I think that you got to be confident in the story you want to tell, and just the
Yeah.
people that are going to be along for the ride will be there. The people that are against it are just not. You can't spend
Mm.
all of your time addressing people that don't want to buy into or invest in what you're doing in the first place.
Mm. What? So was that Darth Plagueis that we saw or no?
Certainly seemed like Darth Plagueis. It made a lot of sense. With the backstory of using the midichlorians to create life. Of course, the Sith that we know did that, Darth Plagueis.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I thought it made a lot of sense to reference Darth Plagueis here. A lot of people were wondering if we were going to get to Darth Plagueis. I know that some people thought that maybe it was going to be Plagueis under the helmet. Um, I thought that that was a great reference. If you know who Plagueis is, when he showed up, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" So I saw immediately some people were not happy about it because, of course, um, but I thought it was great. I thought it was a great way to um, get us to question: All right, is Plagueis Chimere's master, or is Plagueis just somebody that's watching these things play out and is going to try to um, orchestrate them in his favor?
Hmm.
Because and I mean that's also the great thing about the show is that Chimere's doing enough evil things that are they're evil, quote unquote, but you're also like, well, wait a minute, is he the bad guy? Because you're
Hmm.
looking at it from the perspective of OSHA. The whole show is from the perspective of OSHA. It's like, well, wait a minute, is Chimere the bad guy here? Because you guys are doing all these things that we've seen bad guys do before. I mean, just look at how the
Hmm.
show ends. The show ends in the same way that we've seen the heroes of the franchise um, standing together and holding hands and looking at the sunset. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, the people that are supposed to be the good guys, they're in a dark room keeping secrets.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of this does feel fly directly into the face of episode 4, which said, that's the bad guys. These are the good guys. We got to stop these bad guys because they're killing all of us. And their rule is, we're under the boot of the Nazi regime. We got to get out from under. We got to beat Hitler. And
Yes.
like, there, dude, it feels like we look. This statement is not to suggest that it's a good or bad thing. We are so far removed from that now that we're suggesting Jedi's maybe they're the bad guys. I'm like, well, are they?
Well, see, I don't think that the Jedi are the bad guy. I just
Right,
think
right.
that the show does enough to get you to question the Jedi, and that's initially what the Sith wants you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, the Jedi are very flawed in a lot of ways. We see that a lot in Ahsoka's story. We see that in a lot of the stuff before the prequel trilogy. We of course see that a lot in the prequel trilogy as well. Um, the Sith are still the bad guys. Let's not get this mixed up, people. The Sith are still the
Mm-hmm.
bad guys, but the Sith were smart enough to play off of the Jedi's flaws to ultimately win. So by the time we get to the original trilogy, uh, it looks so dour and it's straightforward that the Sith are the bad guys and everything is in despair because they won. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the difference in the High Republic era and the original trilogy era is we're looking at the original trilogy era where the Sith won, and in the High Republic era, the Jedi had already won. The Sith don't exist anymore. I mean, look at
Mm.
what I said earlier. At the beginning of the original trilogy, there are two Jedi. In this part of the High Republic era, from their perspective, there are two Sith because there are always two Sith. There's a rule of two.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And we didn't mention, Phil, that Saul let May die. Like, remember, he was holding up both sides of that, I guess, natural bridge. Did he ever reveal that to them? I don't think he ever said it out loud, did he?
Well, he did apologize to May that he wanted to save them both. He said his
Right,
biggest
right. Yeah,
regret
yeah.
was that he wanted to save them both. But I thought also that um the whole point with Saul is that because I've seen people say that his problem is that he was desperate to have a Padawan, and I don't think that's what it was. I think he wanted a Padawan, but I think the problem was that he had grown too emotionally connected to Osha.
Mm,
He had this emotional connection with her that he wasn't just looking at her as a mentor or a teacher. He was looking at her as like, I have to save her from this. I have to be, a father figure in some ways. And that's not what she needed. She needed a teacher. And I think he was just too emotionally connected to his initial Padawan. And you don't see that at all with Jackie. And you see how well Jackie was turning out because they didn't have the same connection.
Mhm.
But I think that's what it was. And you even see that with him deciding to just, I have to save Osha. If I can't save them both, at least I can save Osha. Because it looked like if he tried to focus and hold both parts of that bridge up, they were just both going to die. And so he made that choice in the moment of, all right, if I have to choose, I'm going to pick Osha because I was emotionally connected to her. And so I don't think he
Yeah.
intended to let May die. I think he just was too emotionally connected to one of them to think objectively. And that was the problem the entire time. If he had let things play out and he wasn't so dead set on, I have to save this girl from this tribe, that he didn't need to save them. Her mother had already given her the choice to go, but he didn't know any of that.
Yeah, because it was like a sort of a series of misunderstandings that took him back there to begin with.
Yes.
I felt like, Phil, that could have been easily rectified by the character saying, I sensed a darkness in May that frightened me. And that's why, you know what I mean? Like, it still sucks. It's still a kid. But you could have said, well, it kind of sucks, but I can see it. Like, but he never said that. Like, to your point, I just like this Osha kid. I'm going to just save her.
Yes. Um, yeah, but I also think that's again this idea of perspective. From his perspective, all right, well, May is curious and she seems to want to come with us. And she doesn't have the same attachments to this village. It's going to be harder to get May to come with us because she's already lied to us. She's already willing to do everything they tell her to do.
Mm, yeah, that's fair. We mentioned Kelnaka. This is actually Eunice Suotamo, I believe. He's a Finnish actor and former pro basketball player. And this is the same guy that was Chewbacca in The Force Awakens, and later played the character as well. So he's back here as Kelnaka. I don't know if we got enough of the Wookiee Jedi. Is that a stretch? Wasn't this a character in the comics or the animated series before he ever got here? Or no?
Um, I believe he is, but I didn't read a lot of comics, so I don't know.
I mean, I could be wrong, but it seemed like that's he had come from something else, but I could be wrong. Let's see, David Harewood, who we mentioned in the last episode from Out of Nowhere. You'll know him from Supergirl as Martian Manhunter on that show.
Yes.
He's here as Ray in Court. He's a senator on the last episode. We got him for 5 minutes, Phil, but he was great.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like they're setting up season 2 without it even being greenlit yet, which is weird, but that's fine. So maybe I assume we'll get more of him. He's basically anti-Jedi. He wants the whole thing shut down because, you got to have that guy. You got to have a guy telling the Ghostbusters, hey, turn off the trap. Turn it off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We have to have that crazy bureaucrat that comes in like, what are you guys doing here? Like we gotta do something about this. This needs to be under control. There needs to be accords.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I thought he was great, and even just seeing the few minutes of him, I was like, he was one of the main reasons why I'm like, I hope we get another season so we get more of him in this role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Vernestra, who we mentioned, that's Rebecca Henderson. Charlie Barnett, who we've not mentioned, is Yord Fandar. If that's not a Jedi name in Star Wars, I don't know what is. He was the by the book Jedi Knight and Temple Guardian. Yeah, he's we didn't get a whole lot of him here either. I mean, he got killed along with the rest of them. There were moments, Phil, that character kind of felt like he was poorly written, kind of a dunce at any given time. But didn't he have a Padawan as well?
Yeah, Yord had points where he was very annoying. But I think Yord was supposed to be annoying.
Well, it worked.
But he had moments where he was pretty annoying. He also had the trademark Killmonger dreads that we've seen way too many times from a black character in fiction. It's like to give these characters a different hairstyle. It's okay.
Really? Yeah.
But I thought Yord fit perfectly as a foil for Osha early on because again he's that same kind of character like May of like I'm this is what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to go along with the order. You're supposed to go along with the status quo. And um OSHA in a lot of ways represented chaos. And it's just that idea of balance. In order to have, order, there needs to be chaos on some other level. And she just it just seems like no matter where you put her, she's gonna bump heads with somebody because she's questioning everything.
Yeah. Fandar did have a Padawan. It's Tassie Loa, played by Thara Shun, by the way, who
Okay.
kind of just disappears because they don't kill her.
Yeah, he goes on this mission and never comes back.
Yeah. She's trying to call him. Hey, call me back. What's going on out there?
I love when they walk in and he's steaming his robe. For some reason, that just was very funny to me because it's like, well, how do they keep these robes so like pristine? There's not a single wrinkle on any of them, and we finally catch a Jedi
Oh,
steaming his robe.
oh man. Well, fashion, Phil. They got those nice, clean robes. Got to keep them nice and clean. So, got to keep them pressed. I know, Phil, at any given time, I don't want to say fascination, but there's a desire to put a droid in. They put a droid in, so they check that box. It's Star Wars. We got a lovable droid. And then they also check the box of lovable creature.
Yes.
Basil, I guess is how it's pronounced. I hated this. I couldn't stand it. Like, there was some very intense moments and like serious scenes, and all of a sudden there he is sniffing around like a dog, and I'm like, yeah, you're ruining it. This is ruining it for me. I didn't need this. Feel like, I mean, BB-8 would have made more sense, or a droid that could roll around or something than this guy. I couldn't get over it. I was not a fan of this at all.
Um. Yeah, I like the use of the robot. Um. I didn't like all of the scenes he was in. I wasn't like, oh, this robot's great. But I like the use of the robot from the beginning, to show us, well,
Mhm.
look, she's the good guy because she has a droid companion. We've seen several times in Star Wars the people with the droid companion, they're the good guy. Like when Anakin was a good guy,
Mhm.
he had droid companions. I mean, he had droid companions. So OSHA must be the good guy. And I like that separation of the show of the thing that started her descent into the dark side is her letting go the only friend that she had in the droid. And so when she thought she had killed her droid or sacrificed her droid, that was the thing where you started to change. And then of course, May eventually took on the droid and started wearing light colors, and then she became the protagonist instead of the antagonist.
Yeah, I guess, Phil, because the idea is that when you're Sith, that the only person you care about is yourself, and that means droids mean nothing to you.
Yeah, I could see that, but I also that's why I also say there's such good parallels here. There's such a good dichotomy that they create here in that um, you're telling us several times throughout this show that hey, joining the Sith is a good thing because you're free to be whoever you want to be. You're free to um, have emotions. You're free to learn things that they're telling you that you can't learn. You're free to maybe indulge in things. But at the same time, if that's the case, then why do you have to seclude yourself?
Yeah.
And that's the question, of course, that OSHA's not asking herself. But hey, this is a great selling point. Hey, but if you ask some more questions, it's like, well, wait a minute, if this is freedom, then why do I have to do this and why do I have to do that?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and you report here and stand like this, and you can't do this because we didn't tell you to. Yeah, it does kind of feel like the military at some point.
Yeah, but I feel like it's just the thing is, it's relatively freedom because it's in comparison to the Jedi telling you all these things you can't do and
Mhm.
giving you all these rules. Oh, we have less rules,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that this also isn't self-destructive.
Yeah. There's things here. I mean, got the hot Sith guy. There's parallels with lightsabers. There's, the twins thing is there. Some of the witches stuff, I don't quite get it. But it's fine. Again, Phil, not here to attack anything, but they are. I've watched some behind the scenes stuff, listen to interviews with the director and the actors and everything. They are completely sold on this, and they feel as though this is well, this is going to sound like something. They feel as though everything's great and that this is a great story. And I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. I wonder, had this been a film, had all this been one film, and let's say it didn't perform, not that it bombed, let's say it didn't perform, do we then get a second film? Or is it because this is a streamer and it's a Disney property anyway, we're going to get a second season regardless? How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I think that's also the benefit of not doing a movie is that you have more time to tell your
Mhm,
story. And the thing with a lot of shows now is they don't get a chance sometimes to develop into a better show and tell a full story. I mean, think of like some all-time great TV shows. Like for me, Sopranos is a good show, but it really started to get excellent into like season 2 and
mhm,
season 3. Um, there are so many other examples I can give, like Power that was on Stars. Like the first season was fine, but season 2 is really when it turned into a great show.
mhm,
And I feel like a lot of times people are so quick to be like, "Oh, that show didn't work for me, so cancel it."
mhm.
It's like, well, you gotta let these shows develop and actually tell their story before you're ready to cancel it. I mean, there are other shows like that. Breaking Bad is another one. Better Call Saul. These shows had the time to develop into classic shows. When you cut these shows short in the first season, they don't get a chance to develop into a great show. They can, but I think when you've just already written it off in the first season, then we just don't know what it'll develop into. There are so many shows where I think of if we wrote it off in the first season, it wouldn't have turned into a classic.
Should the episodes be an hour instead of a half hour?
I do think that they have to have a consistent runtime. I think going and having some episodes that are longer and then having shorter episodes didn't help it.
Because I honestly feel like the episode should have been an hour. Because at the 30-minute mark, more often than not, I was sitting there going, I don't know what just happened, or I don't know what this means, or did they end this too early? I kind of felt like that several times throughout the course of this show.
I do think the runtime was very confusing at times, but Disney Plus does that quite often with their shows where they kind of have the runtime that jumps around. They have the length of their shows that jump around. I think there's a reason why the standard 13 episode season worked or the 10 episode
Mhm.
season worked. And I think this show could have used more than 8 episodes.
Oh, dude, I totally agree with that. Especially if you're not going to do hour episodes, there should have been at least 10 here, maybe 11 or 12. 12 sounds too many, maybe 10 at least.
Yeah, I think 10 episodes would have been much better.
Yeah, it's again, it's a fascinating thing to watch where it's and look, all things being fair, like in Rotten Tomatoes, and look, I know there's people have they feel certain things about Rotten Tomatoes. 81% of 222 critics gave it a positive review, which is high. The fans gave it 15%. Now,
Hmm.
there's something to be said, Phil, about bots, about phony reviews, and like Rotten Tomatoes saw some spikes, like 10,000 new reviews in like a week or 2 weeks. That's someone programming bots to bomb, to review bomb this show. Okay, absolutely ridiculous. There's no
Yes.
sense in that because fans feel like they have to crap on things that they don't enjoy or that they don't understand or whatever. But like Phil, I think the double-edged sword here is you can't possibly pick out all the ne'er-do-wells who hate you for the wrong reasons and the people who genuinely have legitimate gripes. And you can't distinguish one from the other. So to chalk it up as, well, they're all haters, okay, I guess you can. But like we said earlier, you're not addressing issues that fans who legitimately were being courteous and friendly and, nice about it and just said, hey, this is weird to me. I didn't understand this. You're not going to address those people. So that's not going to happen. But like again, Phil, this idea of we're going to double down because we're convinced we've made something great. Look, I almost at this point want to see a season 2 because, prove everybody wrong. And if you can't, fine. But like, give me something more. And dude, Phil, if they hit us with 8 episodes, an hour each for a season 2, and it's fantastic, wonderful. I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a fascinating thing for me to sit back and watch it happen, dude.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to people that are like there is some fair
Mm-hmm.
criticism to it. That is a stark contrast. 80% to 15%. That is a drastic drop off. There's no way in the world that I believe that all viewers think this show
Yeah,
is
I
that
agree.
bad. There's no way. Like when you look at something else, like I'm, I like if you look at Ahsoka, I'm looking at it now. Theirs is at 84% from
Mm-hmm.
critical response, but the fan response is
Wow.
64%. That's why I'm saying that's a little bit that's closer in line to what I think is right. That maybe critics like this, but certain amount of fans are not going to like it. Like that 15% difference, I can get on board with that making sense. But we're talking about a 60%
Yeah.
difference. There's no way I believe that that's realistic.
It seems drastic. But at the same time, we always say all this stuff is subjective. Do I believe there's that much of a difference? No, I don't. But like Phil, this whole thing is weird to begin with. The way things are manipulated, the way bots can be programmed, the way people like they review bomb the boys for this season because all the wacky Trumpers found out
Hmm.
it was hitting a little too close to home for him, Phil. So they went and review bombed the crap out of that
Yeah,
series, and it tanked in terms of Rotten Tomatoes on the fan side. Like I know it's a thing, but like again, Phil, to me, you're picking. I don't know. It's like picking gnats out of crap, I guess, for lack of a better analogy. Like, how do they really know? I guess they don't, do they? There's no way for them to actually know the truth.
you don't, and that's the problem with this. That's the problem with the internet right now. You have a large vocal side of the fan base saying one thing, but they don't speak for
Mm.
everybody, and that's a large amount of people that care to get on the internet and go on Rotten Tomato and give their review for something. There's also a larger percentage of people that probably watch this show and don't get on the internet and say anything
Mm.
about it. They just enjoy it for what it is, or if they don't like it, they just stop
Mm.
watching it.
Yeah, dude.
And
Yeah, that's
so
fair.
I just don't totally buy into that at all because the internet is just not a good barometer for what everybody thinks.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, them just tracking reviews, it's fine. Well, Phil, if all the look, maybe this is a wild idea. Maybe cut off the fan review side of it altogether. Cut it off and just aggregate the reviews from the top, 100 publications in the United States, whether it's online or still in print or whatever. And that's what Rotten Tomatoes is. I think I could live with that a lot easier than I can this other garbage that's happening.
Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. I'll do what I must.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that argument, but I can also see the argument that it shouldn't just be what critics and certain outlets think of it. We should get some place where the fans are allowed to voice their opinion.
Yeah.
But see, the problem with that is when you give the fans that kind of opportunity, people misuse it.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and look, you and I know this name, Peter Siegel, who directed Tommy Boy, and we reviewed things that he's done here before. I heard him on a podcast recently where he was talking about early in his career, he would be legit upset. And he told a story of, I don't know if it was him or someone that he knew, who actually contacted a reviewer who had just gave the movie. I mean, it was a bad review, didn't like it, and actually asked the guy, "Do you have a problem with me?" Like, put him on the spot. Do you have is there an issue? Do we need to talk about it? Why did you do this? And the reviewer was like, "Look, it's my job. It's nothing personal. This is my opinion. This is all my opinion. I've never met you. I don't have
Hmm.
anything against you. I gave my opinion on your movie. That's all I did." And I'm like, those guys can really chalk it up to, I'm just doing my job. I respect that to a point, Phil, but I do believe when people have ulterior motives for whatever reason, they can do a lot of damage, as we saw with Siskel and Ebert over the years, man.
Yeah, it's difficult because uh, this is all just opinions. But the thing is, somebody giving their opinion and possibly being more nasty about their opinion than they need to be at a major outlet where they have a lot of people listening to them, um, it can be harmful. And that's the same way with fans because you have these YouTube channels that are run by fans that have millions of followers and millions of viewers, thousands of viewers, and these are people that are all watching this one guy telling you how much I hate this, or several people saying I hate this and none of you should like it too. And it's definitely going to sway a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. Phil, in the grand scheme of things, in the end, was for you, not speaking for anybody else, for you personally, was this show worth it? Could you have lived without it? Would you have liked to have seen it done better? I mean, what's your take here in the end of this?
I enjoyed it. I think that a lot of the moments in this made it worth it. There were some things that we have never seen in a live action
Mhm.
Star Wars movie. There were some interesting new ideas. I think the concept and the idea behind the show was very smart, and it was built around things that George Lucas did with the franchise as well. Do I think that everything they did was executed well? No. Do I think it was always well written? No. I think that for the most part, the pacing was a major problem throughout the show. But I still think it was a very enjoyable show. I enjoyed most of the new characters that we were introduced to. Um, I like the story that they told. Again, I think it could have been told better. But I enjoyed it on the whole. It's the most I've enjoyed probably any new uh content we've got from Star Wars in a while.
Wow. High praise.
Yeah, I mean for me
Mhm.
personally, I think when you're talking about the top tier of the live action Star Wars shows so far, I think it's Mandalorian and Andor. And then Obi-Wan is probably not far
Mhm.
behind. Um I think this is like ranked around Book of Boba Fett probably for me. I would say I enjoyed Book of Boba Fett probably the least of all of the live action Star Wars shows. And this is, I believe, is better than that show. But I don't think it's better than like Ahsoka, for example. I think some of the other shows were just made and they told better and they told a better story throughout.
I agree with that. Well, kids, we gave you exactly what I warned you we were going to give you. So if you're blowing steam because we didn't say the F word and we didn't rip this show to shreds because you really wanted to, or because you have been, well, again, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. It's not how we roll here. I made it clear what my issues were with it. I'm not in love with this show. Could I live without it? I could live without this show. I'll be honest. However, it's not enough for me to lose any sleep tonight. I promise you. And plus, if
No.
we get some good storytelling out of a season two, I feel like season one would mean that season one was worth it, and I'm okay with that. And plus, we got to see Jedi's fighting in lightsaber duels, and I'm always here for that. I mean, again, the doubling down thing. I'm sorry to keep repeating that. It's weird to me. I don't get it, but it's not my property. I didn't direct an episode. I didn't star in anything. I didn't write a word of the dialogue. So maybe I would 100% feel differently if I were on the other side of this conversation. So maybe I would be part of that effort to hashtag renew the acolyte. Maybe I would be. I don't know. But only time's going to be able to tell what's going to happen here. It's up to the fine folks at Disney. And if they want to move forward with season two, you guys can watch or you cannot watch and hate it from a distance if that's what you want to do. As of right now, it's still a free country. Talk to me in November and I'll tell you if we're still free or not. It's my show. It's my show. I don't
Uh,
care. I'll say
listen, we've learned from this show that freedom is relative.
it.
Um,
Indeed.
yeah, I don't know. I think at most, the thing that is promising about season two is that season two won't be burdened by the mystery of what the Jedi are hiding, so
Mm,
that it has its room to just tell a story that is just moving forward and it doesn't have to constantly do flashbacks. Like maybe you can do flashbacks here and there, but I think the fact that you had to fill in so many of the gaps throughout this season also kind of slowed down the pace of the actual story they were telling in present day.
mm. That's fair. That's fair. Well, let's try to put a button on this, Phil, if you can. We've both gave a lot of opinions here today, but what's your last word, at least for right now, on the Acolyte?
I think, of course, it's going to go down as a divisive show on the internet, but I also think it was very enjoyable. I think it introduced some great new characters. I think it had some good concepts. There were some very smart ideas that went into this. We saw some really cool moments in live action that we've never seen. We got to see a Sith bleed a crystal on in live action. We've never seen that before.
Mm.
We got some good action, some great fight scenes. Yeah, not a perfect show, but I enjoyed it.
I totally forgot to mention that, and I completely meant to. That felt so weird to me. Is that a thing in the books, by the way?
I believe it was something introduced in the comics. I believe it was introduced in the Darth Vader comic.
Ah, you know what? That makes sense. That makes sense. That thing's been referenced quite a bit for this series. I need to go check that book out. I never did read it.
Yeah, May's entire mission is a tie back to Vader's mission in his comic, where he has to go and kill a Jedi without using his lightsaber.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, her entire mission is based off of that.
Well, look, there again, kids. It's you can choose to hate this if you wanna. You can choose to love this. You can choose to say you wish they took it in other directions. That's fine as well. Whatever you want. But me personally, I'm not going to spend my time hating much of anything. Well, a couple of things, but nothing that a director made because that's weird, and I don't get it. But as we said before, we'll see what the future holds, and hopefully, if there's a season 2, they'll clean up some of this stuff and things will be maybe a little bit more cohesive. And as Phil said, we won't have the major plot of the whodunit kind of thing happening with the backstory of the Jedi. Maybe we can just move on and have a successful series. Whether or not any of that's going to happen is anyone's guess. We will see. But you can be sure of one thing: new Star Wars content is not going to stop anytime soon. Disney's making their money back, and they're going to continue creating. And look, if they didn't do any of this stuff, we would never have The Mandalorian. We would never have Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we got to remember there are positives to this. And I guess you don't have to like everything if you don't want to. And it's fine if you don't. It's all subjective. Like whatever you want to like. But the next time you hit behind a keyboard and decide to blast someone for skin color or for their gender or for the weird gender that you don't understand and you think it's weird and it's off because it doesn't match yours, think twice. Too much hate in the world. My God in heaven, what are we doing to each other? And we're doing it through entertainment. It blows my mind. And the more stuff we review here on the show, the more we've put it out there and said we are not that kind of podcast. It sounds weird to say. I can't believe you have to say the words "we're inclusive." You would think that every normal person with a heart and half a brain would already be that way. Unfortunately, they're not. We here on the 6MR, and that's how we're rolling. So check us out to come. Keep your eyes open on the Star Wars universe, and we'll see what happens. But for now, that is the Acolyte.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.